welcome back to the Talk Busy with Lizzy podcast. I'm your host, Lizzy, and our special guest that we are here with this week is named Melissa. She is absolutely just an amazing woman, and she is here to share her story of her marriage in an abusive, narcissistic relationship, and then getting out of that and what her life looks like now. And I'm so excited that she has agreed to come on because she does so much good work in just bringing awareness to the subject. And so, yeah, I'm going to let her share her story. So without further ado, let's get into it.
What is your story?
So, I guess you found me because I post a lot about narcissistic abuse. It's kind of my focus on my TikTok these days. I guess I'm very passionate about talking about it just because I do think that it's become very common. It seems like even more so over the years. And from what I understand, it is part to do with social media and all that. But for me, I did not first hear the term narcissistic abuse until about 10 years ago, about 2014, I would say. I was starting the process. My now ex-husband we were separated, I suppose, and I was talking to a friend about some of the behaviors and how I'd been treated. And we had been together for about 9 years at that point, and I had never told a single soul about anything that went on in our relationship. I was very much protective of him, even though he was emotionally, verbally, physically abusive to me. My primary concern was always to protect that. I didn't want anyone to know. And so I was talking to a friend about it finally, kind of like a distant friend, so it felt safer to talk to them about it. And he said, well, what you're describing sounds like narcissistic abuse. I took psychology in college, and that's, we learned a lot about that. And I had no idea what that was. So I start Googling it, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, to a T, all of these behaviors were exactly what I had experienced. So it was the first time I had something to put to it, because I just always assumed he was a jerk or someone that I could help. He had like a rough childhood. He had a rough family life. And so I thought he was someone that I could help and fix and like love into healthiness, and it's bizarre to think that you have that kind of power to like fix another person. But I really believed that. And then the more I started learning about it and going to therapy and really learning that, this is a personality disorder. It's not just like someone who's not very nice, and I wish I had known more about that before this, I didn't know that it was like a mental health disorder. I really didn't know that. And so it was something that my therapist really helped me work through. And she was someone who had seen both he and I together. So she was able to like really see it for herself, which was helpful and validating for me, because I always felt like I was crazy. And I don't know, I guess maybe I should like explain narcissistic abuse better for people who may not understand it.
Awesome. Yeah.
I hate to use like a lot of the buzzwords like gaslighting and like those things, because I do feel like lately, especially, they get a lot of like press and like buzz, and it kind of only makes it like washed down or watered down to how bad it is. I feel like nowadays it's, if somebody's getting divorced or they're in a bad relationship, it's like, oh, they're a narcissist, or someone who's not very nice is just a narcissist. But there's actual criteria to be diagnosed as a narcissist, and I think where I've done a lot of therapy and tried to figure out like, how did I end up with this person, right? Like, this is a me problem. So I have to figure out like where I went wrong, And so that was super interesting to me too, to be able to go to therapy and start kind of dissecting my own life and like, how did I end up here, And so it kind of went back, I realized, to my parents' marriage, right? And I love my parents dearly. They're still married today. They live near me. We have a great relationship. But my parents didn't spend a lot of time together. They very much like, they had like their Saturday night date night. But other than that, they were like two different people living their lives. And I realized, I didn't realize it at the time, but as I became an adult, I realized I didn't want that. I wanted someone who wanted to spend time with me. I wanted to like go to the grocery store together or go to the gym together or whatever.
Right.
We enjoyed doing things together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I met my now ex-husband, it was like the love bombing, which is what narcissists do. They meet you, you're everything they've been looking for. You guys have the same interests. It's like they sort of become you so that you can have this like wild connection you didn't know was possible. And it seems like earth-shattering and all the things you've been waiting for. And then, it's great for a while. It's almost like too much, right? You're spending all your time with this person. They want to see you every second of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what I wanted, I didn't realize at the time that it was like also unhealthy, right? Like
Right.
I then started, it became that I wasn't allowed to see my friends, or I had to do everything with him. And honestly, the first few months, it didn't bother me so much because I'm like, oh my gosh, he loves me so much. This is great. But after a while, it starts to become very controlling. And you're like, wait a minute, like, why can't I go to the mall with my friends? Or why can't I go out to dinner with my girlfriends? And it just all starts to change, but it changes very slowly so that it's not shocking to you. You just sort of like adapt to all these changes,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes normal. And then it's, put downs here and there. It's like they used to compliment you and say all these wonderful things about you. And now it's, you're not doing this well enough. And, you're fat, or you're, whatever they come up with. And so then you just start to doubt yourself and you start feeling bad about yourself. And then they get you to stay there because they've convinced you no one else is ever going to want you because of all these things they're pointing out to you, all your shortcomings or whatever. And they might be things you already feel bad about yourself, right? So you think, okay, well, this person's willing to stick with me even though XYZ. And so you just, I don't know, you just stick through it. And I mean, then we ended up getting married because then you start to think like, if we get to this next thing, maybe things will get better, right? So I thought, okay, maybe if we get married, he'll be nicer to me. I don't know why you would think that, but I did. Or maybe when you have kids, we want to have kids, we'll have a family, things will be better then. No, obviously anyone who's had a kid knows that just makes things harder, even in a good relationship, right? So, or like if we move to a bigger house, or if he gets a new job, or all these things, you just keep putting this bar like, okay, once this thing happens, then things will get better. And they don't, Or if you meet their needs on something, like if they tell you, I need you to do this, and then you do that, then the bar gets raised up here. So then you have to like try to meet that need. And it's just, it's never enough, right? And so you exhaust yourself trying to be this perfect person that you can't ever really attain because no one can be perfect, but also just because they'll keep moving it on you, So that's kind of where I ended up. And then, of course, many narcissists too feel entitled to many different partners and infidelities. So that's where that went after we had a few kids. So he ended up having an affair with someone from work, and he would lie to me about trips he was on for work, and he was with her and they were in Mexico, and I had all kinds of people basically at this point kind of helping me figure out like the truth, because there was just so many lies all the time, and I'm trying to take care of 3 little kids, and it was just like the worst time of my life. When I think back on it, I'm like, oh my goodness, like if you can make it through something like that, I think you can get through a lot of things, right? And I was very fortunate. I had a lot of support. Once we kind of separated and he stopped like staying at our home, then I started opening up to my family at the push from my therapist too. She was like, wait, no one knows what's gone on in your life? And I was like, no. So she encouraged me to talk to my family and friends, and once I opened up to them, it was just freeing, I guess, because, they had seen things that I didn't think they had seen, and they didn't voice those things to me. But it just kind of validated some of the things that I already felt. So then what? Then we ended up getting divorced. And that process took a while too, because of course there was a bunch, even though he was like with this other woman and essentially living with her, there was a lot of like returning to me and texting me and, wanting to repair the family and the marriage. And that messed with me for about 2 years. Like, I had filed for divorce. He convinced me to dismiss that, promised he wanted to work on things while still seeing this woman the entire time. I mean, there's just so much deceit. And then finally, that's around the time we started going to the therapist together. And we went in there one day and I was telling her things that had happened just that week, ways he was talking to me, treating me. And she kind of stopped and she looked at both of us and she said, I'd like to talk to both of you alone for like 5 minutes. And she had him leave the room. This has stuck with me all this time. And she stopped and she looked at me and she goes, run for your life. And I was like, wait, what? Because also this therapist, so we got married in a Catholic church. And so when things started going bad, I reached out to the priest who had married us. And he said, listen, we have a great in-house therapist. We'll pay for it. We'll pay for your counseling. Like, it's on us. We want to help you fix your marriage, right? So it was amazing. I mean, we got all these free sessions through the church, which was awesome. And so hearing that from her, like, I was just like, wait, what? You're like Catholic. You're supposed to keep us together. Like, and she was just like, no, girl, like, run for your life. She's like, he's not going to change. This is who he is. He has shown you who he is. And she goes, I can't help him. She goes, but I would love to still work with you if you want to come back and see me. I'm so happy to like still work with you. And she goes, I don't ever want to see you guys back here together. And I was like, okay. And that really like solidified it for me. And like right after that, I filed for divorce the second time. And then, I mean, ever since then, so that was now about 8.5 years ago. And since then, it's just been a constant chaos still, it's like you leave this abuse hoping for like a better life and peace in your life. And it's honestly, over the last 8 years, it's increased. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And the family court system is severely broken.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't help. They just allow it to continue, really. I mean, they'll throw you a little Band-Aid here or there, like, oh, we'll have him do anger management classes. Like, that's gonna fix things right up. And it doesn't. So, I mean, it's just wild. I've been now in the family court system since 2014.
Wow.
So 11 years this year. I don't know. It's really, really frustrating. It's, we've asked for lots of things over the years that went ignored. We asked for an attorney for the kids 5 years ago. We were finally just given that like 6 months ago.
Wow.
So we now have a GAL, which is a guardian ad litem for our daughters. So she represents them, which is wonderful. But it's just all a slow moving process. And my oldest daughter just turned 15. She's had a therapist now for I'd say about 3 years. And he's been very helpful and he understands like all the dynamics. So he helps give her tools to kind of like deal with what she has to go deal with, because they don't want to like take custody away, or they don't want to like punish him for any of the things he does to them, which he has hit my oldest. He's threatened to sell her to human traffickers. There's like a long list of things that he's done to her. And it's like, no matter how much I try to protect her, it's like I'm screaming in a room by myself. It's like no one can hear me. No one's listening. My attorney is great. She's helpful. She gets it. But she can only get so far with it too. It's just, I don't know. It just feels like every time you feel like you're moving, you get hit with another roadblock. And it's really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
And so lately I've just felt really like emboldened to like talk about it more and just be like, listen, we need to get people on this. I don't care. Like, do I need to go to a news station? Do I need to go like riot at the courthouse? Like, I don't know what you guys want me to do, but this is insane. And I'm not the only one, like being on TikTok now, I've seen that there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of people dealing with this, and not just women, men too. Men can be like, I don't want to say victims, but on the receiving end of this abuse also. And it's like the courts are so focused on, parenting and equal parenting and giving everyone this equal time with children. And it's like, it's just not what's best for them.
Yeah.
They say it's what's best for them, but it's just not,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's just something I really would love to see changed. And my oldest daughter is very fiery. She has a very strong personality, most of which she does not get from me, I'll say. But she gets frustrated with it. And I hope one day she can, use her voice to do something about it too. Because it's a tough place for kids, because as much as they are abused, that's still their parent and they still love their parent,
Right.
And so it's very hard, and it's a hard place to be in as their healthy parent, because, you don't want to put down that parent because they still love that parent so much, right? But it's like this fine line you're walking of teaching them like what's healthy behavior and what's not, without disparaging, and validating them without, I don't know. It's, like she'll say to me, she knows he doesn't love her. And that's still one that I have a hard time with, because I'm like, I don't want to say, yeah, you're right. But I also don't want to say, no, he totally does, because I don't want her to think that that's what love is, right? So that's a tough one. That's still one that I still always kind of struggle with the right thing to say, I don't know. It's just a shame that kids don't have more of a voice in these situations, and that they really can't speak up for themselves. And so then you've got one parent talking about the other, and they just think, oh, they're bitter. They just don't like that parent. The amount of times I've been told by judges that I just don't like my ex-husband is like, after seeing that he's hitting them and doing all these crazy things, they're just, well, you just don't like him. And I'm like, well, correct, I don't, but that's not why I'm here.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. It's just something that I would love to see reformed and changed in a major way. And so that's kind of why I'm making TikToks about it.
Yeah, well, it's awesome that you are, because like you said, you're definitely not the only person going
Right?
through that. And there are so many people who feel alone in that. And so I love that you're a
Yes.
voice for that. I think that that's
Yes.
truly
Thank you
amazing.
for saying that. That's another reason why I say it, because I remember I felt so alone. Because, like I said, I didn't talk to anybody about it at all. And so once I started talking about it, it was like these floodgates were open, and so many other people are going through this, and no one's talking about it. And it's like, once you feel like you have this like village of people who understand and relate, it's just so validating and comforting, because you've been meant to feel like you're crazy for so long that you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying too, I think narcissist and gaslighting, like, those are buzzwords that are thrown out like crazy. And so I think it is important to show like genuinely what that is.
Yeah.
Like in your case, are there any other specific, like, you were talking about different criteria people have to meet. Do you want to talk a little bit more on that?
I mean, I guess I don't know the exact criteria. I just know that I, it's like a DSM is the category for like people with these kind of behaviors. And so there's like, I know there's like narcissistic personality disorder, and then sometimes borderline personality disorder is like associated with that. I know that that's like what my therapist said about my ex in particular. She felt he had both of those. There's like, I mean, there's just a lot of them, and I don't know exactly the criteria, I guess, to like diagnose someone with it.
Right.
But I know, it's like the classic things. There's lots of like control, lack of empathy is like the major one. Somebody who can't feel bad for other people. I noticed that like my ex, for example, there was no empathy there, but also like if you tried, like I remember if I would talk about like a sad story I saw in the news or something, instead of like feeling for someone, he'd be like, oh my gosh, be quiet. Like, I don't want to hear about that, because it's like they can't feel for anyone. So it's like, then he'd have to pretend, and he couldn't pretend that he felt for this person who was harmed or whatever. So he just wants you to just be quiet. But definitely, lack of empathy, anger, temper, flying off the handle really easily. Um, just control and lack of empathy, I would say, for
Mm-hmm.
my personal experience, were like the two biggies. You know, it was just controlling where you went, when you're going to be back. Their lives are more important than yours. Like, I remember once I had kids, my girlfriends and I would try to get dinner like once every other month or so. And it was like my only time to myself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
other than, luckily my mom lived nearby, so she'd let me like run to the gym some mornings or to the grocery store or something like by myself. But I would get that one little time with my girlfriends. And from the second I sat down until I walked out that door, I was bombarded with text messages. Hurry up. I have things to do. You're wasting my night. I have a life. All these things, because he was home with, you know, our daughters or whatever. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, you know, and he traveled a lot for work. And, you know, over the years, I learned that there were many, many people that he was with while we were together, you know. And I think actually something else interesting to point out is that all of the abuse that I went through was not enough to make me leave. It wasn't until I found out that he was with this woman from work that I was like, okay, I'm filing for divorce. It wasn't the fact that he hit me, you know, slammed my head
Mm-hmm.
into car windows, kicked me, you know, pushed me while I was holding our baby, you know, beat on me with, like, he just did weird stuff, like beat on me with pillows when I was like 8.5 months pregnant with our twins. Just like bizarre things.
Mm-hmm.
He did enough to abuse me where like I never had marks, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
for example, he would slam my head in the car window. He did that to me 2 different times. So like no one would see that there's like, if there was a bruise, no one would see it, right? Because my hair would cover it up. Just a lot of really bizarrely abusive things, but nothing that would leave like, you know, a black eye. But it's like, when you're growing up, like I remember seeing those like after school like specials when I was a kid, and it'd be
Mm-hmm.
like about like teen abuse and stuff, and it's like a girl would show up with like a black eye or like a cut lip, and it's like narcissistic abuse is much more sneaky than that. It's not like outright like, oh, I walked into a door. And I know that does happen to people sometimes where like they are getting physically abused and you can see it. For
Mm-hmm.
most of them, they're good at covering that up and hiding it so that other people don't catch on, you know. They very much are in control when they want to be in control, because people act like, oh, they can't help it, or they just have like these problems. But it's like, no, they control it when there's other people around. It's mostly when you're alone with them that they really let loose and do what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my questions was kind of what got you to that point of leaving. So you said your therapist, and then also finding out that he was
Yes.
cheating.
Yeah. So when I found out that he was, I mean, I had suspicions. I feel like they also kind of almost like give you clues to things sometimes. Like
Mm-hmm.
he would talk about her a lot, and um she was texting him a lot, and I'd ask and he'd be like, "Oh, no, you know, it's nothing." And it's like, you know, I went into the work one day, like he forgot his lunch. So I was like, I'm gonna go in there so I can like meet her in person, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
like I went in there, and I met her, and I was just kind of like, okay. I mean, I didn't feel super threatened. I was just like, all right, whatever. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just being crazy, you know, whatever. And, you know, then after a while I started catching on, but it was like, I just didn't want to believe it either. You know, it was
Right.
like, once he was like not staying at our house anymore, he would tell me like, "Oh, I'm staying with a friend from work," which was true, but he made it out to be it was this other guy from work that he was friends with. And so people would say to me like, "Do you think there's someone else?" And I was like, "Oh, no, no."
Mm-hmm.
No, he's just going through a tough time. Like I just didn't want to believe it. And it's just very sad to think that like with all the abusive things he did to me, that was never enough to make me go like, what am I doing here? You know, it was
Right.
just always, how do I fix this? How can I get him to be nice to me? How can I get him to stop saying these mean things or doing these mean things? Like, what do I have to change within myself to get him to behave differently? Which, unfortunately, I think a lot of women in particular kind of have that, right? Where it's like
Yep.
you're a fixer, you're a helper, you want to like help people. And I felt bad for him. Like I said, he had a really rough childhood. His mom is like him, but like worse. She's like next
Mm-hmm.
level. And I felt bad for him because I saw like how she treated him, how she pitted him and his siblings against each other, and all these things. And I just thought, if he's just loved properly, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it'll all change. And it's just, you know, you can't change someone who doesn't want to change and who doesn't see anything wrong with how they act. And that's obviously something I've learned over the years for sure. But I don't know. It's just really interesting to think that you can just like love someone into health, and that like
Mhm.
if you do or say the right thing, it's just gonna like click or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing that you would say to your younger self who is in that situation, or to someone else that's in that situation?
So I do actually, because I've spoken out about it, even on like my personal Facebook page,
Mm.
I have gotten lots of people to reach out to me over the years, which has just encouraged me to talk about it more, because I get people who reach out to me who are like, I haven't told anyone this. This is what's happening in my relationship. Or I know my best friend is dealing with this and I don't know how to help her. And I think the number one thing, well, I guess two parts. I'll go
Mhm.
back to your question first. I would just say that first, I think people need to educate themselves on healthy relationships. It seems so basic, and you just think you know what a healthy relationship is, but because it's something that happens very gradually and you don't really like notice until you're so far in it, like, wait, what has happened to me, you know?
Mhm.
I think knowledge about this, I really truly believe this should be taught in schools. Like, I think there should just be so much information about healthy and unhealthy relationships, so that you're not even a little confused on what love is, right?
Mhm.
Like, you should know, wait a minute, this person is trying to control who I see, when I see them, what I'm wearing, where I go. That's not right. And I
Mhm.
can't fix that. That's who they are. Like, you have to be able to have that, I guess also confidence in yourself and who you are, right? I do think a lot of people maybe fall into it with lack of self-worth as it is. And so I think it's easier to fall into that kind of relationship if you don't have that strong um, self-worth and confidence in yourself. But to know who you are, what you're willing to tolerate, and what's an absolute no. And anyone who puts you down, or, you know, certainly hits you or anything else,
Right.
but makes you feel bad about yourself in any way, should be an immediate no, you
Mhm.
know? Like, but you have to know those warning signs of like those behaviors. Someone who wants to spend a lot of time with you really fast, or move in together really fast, or anything that's like not at a normal kind of relationship speed, is like a big uh-oh, you know, there's a
Mhm.
problem here. So I really just think educating young adults is like the number one thing that could help this
Yeah.
whole thing. Um, but also, I, like I said, get a lot of people that reach out to me and say, like, how can I help my friend? Or what can I do? And I just, the biggest thing is to just be supportive. Don't tell them, you need to leave this relationship. That guy's not good for you. You need to walk away. You have to figure that out for yourself.
Mhm.
And that is like a big thing I always tell people if they reach out to me, especially if it's like to be supportive of like their best friend or someone they love who's being treated like this. It's easy for us on the outside to be like, the guy's a jerk, why can't you see that? Be done with him. Whatever, like, this is stupid, you're ridiculous, you know. And especially with narcissists, there's a lot of get back together, break up again, get back together, break up again.
Mhm.
So they might tell you, hey, I am like having a hard time, this guy's abusing me, he's cheating on me, he's doing all these things. And you tell your friends that, and then you're back together with them, which for me was why I didn't tell anyone, right? Because I didn't
Right.
want to have that uncomfortableness of my friends and family really not liking him, right? And having to
Mhm.
still come around with him. So that's why I didn't tell anybody. But there most likely will be, I think there's, the studies have shown there's an average of like going back 7 times or something, like a lot.
Right. Yeah.
And so you just have to like be patient with your friend if they're going through that, or your sibling, or whoever it is, and just love them. Just show them what love is, remind them that love feels good and supportive and kind. It's just, that's like the best thing you can do for somebody, because they're getting so much negativity and cruelty, that just your kindness consistently will eventually help them see it too.
Mhm.
But it's just so important that you don't just say, he's out of there, you know, you need to break up with him, I'm not dealing with it, you know, like, you just have to be loving and supportive, and that is the best way to help somebody.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I mean, you answered some of my other questions about what
Okay.
you would do
I
in a
told you I was
situation.
just blah blah.
No, I love it. I always say, like, the more long answers that I have, and like, I love it when people answer the questions I'm about to ask. So I'm like, oh, there goes another one. But I think that that's so important because I think a lot of people, again, like if you have somebody who is pretty consistent in your life, they see things about your partner that you don't see. I mean,
Exactly.
I've experienced that even in, I'm in a very healthy relationship and everything, but I know that I have friends who are like, who have noticed things before that I wouldn't have thought of, and
Right.
we've grown and everything. And so I think that that's really important to have those people and for those people to really be looking out for you. And so I think that's really awesome that you have advice on that. One thing that you had said earlier was that they tend to move really fast, like moving in together really quickly, all
Mhm.
that kind of thing. Is that something you experienced? Was there like a very quick push for marriage or anything like that?
So it's interesting. I know for a lot of people that is the case. It wasn't really like that for me. It wasn't like a push to get married. It was just very much in the beginning. It was like, oh my gosh, I love you so much. This is everything I've ever been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just love you. Let's do everything together. We just need to be together every second of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it did end up where like we were, because when we met, we were both living with our parents still, because we were like in our 20s, just out of college, whatever. So there was a lot of me like staying the night at his parents' house. And it became like me staying there so often. And then we ended up getting a condo within about 3 months. Um, and so then, I mean, we were just together all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friends, actually, I should point this out too. My very best friends, who I've been best friends with now for close to 30 years, um, they saw early on, like this is not healthy. And they saw him like always hurrying me, rushing me, like if I was running late, I got like read the riot act. They just saw all the anxiety that I was starting to like carry, and they didn't like how he treated me. They didn't like so many things. And it ended up where when we got this condo, it was actually a condo for me and my two girlfriends, but he was there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had kind of agreed in the beginning because all of us had boyfriends at the time, like, we won't have the guys there all the time. We want to have time just for us and whatever. Well, that would have never been okay with him. So he was there every night. They didn't like it. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
like him. Um, and it ended up that we ended up where we lived in a condo. It was like an older community condo, and so they found out that we weren't like a single family, and so
Mm-hmm.
there was this huge thing, and we got like booted from this condo complex. But so my friends, had, as we were kind of moving out and like figuring things out, they were like, we don't like him. We don't like how he treats you. And this is where I say, like, you really have to be careful what you say to your friends who are in these relationships and just be supportive, because as soon as they made it very clear they didn't like him, they didn't want to be around him, they weren't going to support any of it, I was like, see you guys, like, you're
Right.
rude. You just don't see the good in him. Like, I remember just defending him so much to my best friends, and I didn't speak to my best friends for a year. A
Wow.
year. They were my very best friends, and I sided with him over them. And of course, it's one of my biggest regrets to this day, but eventually about a year later, and he and I were still together. He like essentially gave me permission to like reach out to them and try to like repair the friendship. And I think at that point they just realized, like, hey, if we still want to be her friend, we're just gonna have to deal with this guy, So they did. Um, they didn't talk bad about him. They just kind of accepted him when he was around. They stood up in our wedding. They were just there for me. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think they had figured out, like, okay, this is what we have to do. So, and they did. And they were like such great friends to me, and they still are to this day. Today is actually one of my best friend's birthdays.
Oh.
Um, but like, even when it all fell apart and, my marriage fell apart and all these things came out and all the way he was treating me, they were just like, we love you. We're here for you. Like, never
Mm-hmm.
once did they say, we told you so. We
Right.
tried to tell you, we saw these things. They never said that to me. They were just like, we love you. We're going to get through this together. And it's just like, it's just so important to have that support.
That's amazing. And I love that aspect of like, no, I told you so, because I think that's so easy for us to be like, oh, I told you this was going to happen.
We warned you.
Yeah. And like sometimes you want to say that because you did, and it's like that's just not how you go about it, because that
not helpful.
No, not at all. But okay, correct me if I'm wrong. You're getting remarried?
I am, yes, okay. This year. Yep.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
My question is, when did you get to the point where you felt like you could get into a relationship again, and how did that kind of work?
So it did take me a long time. I'm the type of person too where like when I'm in a relationship, I'm in it, right? I'm not like looking around or anything like that. So like I still, even, you know, as we went through that divorce process, which ended up being like 2 years long, I still felt like I was married to him, you know, like even though technically we were still married, but even we had been separated for so long, he was living with someone else. Like it still felt like I couldn't. And then, like mentally, I just was not there for several years. Because you just have to like figure yourself out again. You have to figure out like who am I? What do I want? What am I looking for? And so I actually ended up meeting my fiance at our kids' school. So our kids went to school together. And he ended up being in a situation where he was going to file for divorce because he found out about some things in his marriage. And so we started talking as friends. And he was kind of like asking me for some advice because I mean, it was known that like I was divorced, because it was kind of when your kids are like in kindergarten and first grade, not many parents are divorced, you know? So you're kind of like scarlet letters on you, like everybody knows. But so we started out as friends, and it was just like, I remember one of the things that I loved the most about him was like, he let me be myself. He never tried to control me. And still to this day, I mean, that was many years ago now, but he never tried to tell me what I could do or where I could go, or like, he always encouraged my friendships and encouraged me to like have activities and things that I did outside of our relationship, right? So for me, that was probably like the biggest thing that really attracted me to him, is that it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm allowed to go out with my friends. Are you sure? You know? And of course he's just kind to me, and he shows my daughters what kindness looks like, and you know how he treats me. He shows them just a great example of how to respect and love your partner, and that has just been like obviously the most important thing to me. It was like when I was single, it was just like, okay, my home can be peaceful and loving, and that's it. Like I'm not having any kind of chaos in my home whatsoever, so they can see like the stark contrast, you know. And so, you know, I told him, I'm like, my house has to be like peaceful and loving, and that's it. And so he has helped me show them like, you know, what they should expect. So, you know, he's helpful and loving and kind, and talks to me kindly, and, you know, they see the affection, and like, that's exactly what I want to show them.
I love that. I think that that's just amazing, that because I think people can get so scared to get into another relationship after something like that. And obviously you need to process it. You can't just jump into another one, because that's not healthy either. But I love how he's made you like, I talk about this kind of in my own relationship, but like where he's redeemed those parts where it's like, oh, I was always put down, and now he brings me up so much. And this or that. For me, that happened in my relationship too, where it was just something about like boundaries and stuff, where just boundaries were respected, and it was like, whoa. And so I was talking about it as like, that's a redemption aspect of that relationship. So I think that that's really amazing. Another question is, actually, first of all, I want to say congratulations on your engagement and getting married.
Thank you.
Yeah. But second, does your ex have custody at all of your kids?
He does. So yeah. So basically this whole time, he's had just slightly less than I do. So our custody is like, I have my kids for 8 days. He has them for 6. So I have them like one extra day. And it just rotates like every other week like that. But yeah, I mean, I have tried to get more custody so many times. where it's kind of wild. It's like all these crazy things will happen and I'll be like, emergency, please help me. Please, like, give me more custody of my kids. And then he'll, of course, go tell the kids, your mom's trying to take you away from me. She wants to make it so you never see me again. No, of course not. And
Right.
like, I know my girls wouldn't want that. Like, again, it's like, because this is their dad and that all they've known from him is this abusive dynamic, they still love him, but they also know it's not right. Right. So
Right.
it's like they don't want to like never see him again. But they have expressed to me they'd like to see him a little bit less, because it's not healthy. There's just a lot of emotional and verbal abuse that goes on in addition to the occasional physical abuse. Most of it is just like the everyday emotional abuse that goes on.
Yeah.
And it's just really, it's hard to watch. It's really sad. Like I say, I try to just validate them without disparaging their dad. And it's something that I've learned in therapy from my therapist and from my daughter's therapist. They've like gave me tools and how to like approach things so that you're not like, when they say something like, well, I don't like when dad does this to me. They're like, well, you can say, I understand. I didn't like when he did that to me either. And they're like, that's a perfectly acceptable thing to say, because you're validating their experience without saying, well, yeah, I didn't like when that jerk did that to me. You don't have to like add to it,
Yeah.
but you can just be like, I validate and hear what you're saying. And I understand why you don't like that because I didn't like it either. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, I did think of one other thing to say. Before I met my fiance, I did, of course, date. And I think other people have expressed to me too that they are afraid that they'll like find another narcissist in another unhealthy relationship. And I think people get afraid to date because they're afraid, oh, I'm just going to find this same personality again. And you might, but I do think that like once you really understand a lot of it, it's easier to like pinpoint those types of people too.
Right.
For example, somebody set me up with like a cousin's coworker or something, and he picked me up and we're going out, and immediately he starts bad mouthing his ex-wife, talking about, I think I made a comment because his car was like really clean and he had like little boys, and I was like, wow, like your car's really clean. And he was like, they are not allowed to eat in here. My ex-wife's car is filthy. She's disgusting. Like she this, she that. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go have this dinner and then check, please.
Yeah.
Like it's like you'll notice things that like maybe the past you would have been like, she must not be that great of a person, or like it must be her fault, and it's like I think once you learn enough, you're able to like pinpoint certain things where you're like, nope, that's not right, so I think you do have to learn to like trust yourself again, but like also with all the knowledge you now have to make like better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to say really big props to you for that validation of your kids' feelings without throwing your ex under the bus, because I think that that's such an easy thing to do, and I've seen it. I personally haven't experienced it, but I've seen it in my friends' lives where
Sure.
their parents have done that,
Mm-hmm.
where they badmouth the other parent consistently. I had on one of my first seasons of this podcast, I had on a dad who he was going through a custody battle with his ex, and he made it very apparent, like when he talks to his son about his mom, it's never a bad, like he doesn't say a bad word about her. It's
Right.
he doesn't agree with her and what she's doing,
Right.
but he's never going to say your mom's a bad person, your mom's this, your mom's
Right.
that, because they get enough. He's like, they get enough of, he gets enough of that from her about me.
Right.
I'm not going to be
Yes,
giving that same energy.
for
So
sure. And it's just about showing them like the like stark differences between the two of you so they can like discern all of that for themselves. Like all you can do is be you and give them like who you are, and then they see who that person is, and then kids are smart. They figure those things out on themselves. You don't have to like say, oh, your other parent sucks and your other parent's a jerk and they're crazy. Like they figure that out by themselves pretty early on, honestly. I mean, I remember my daughter when she was 8. I was just telling this story the other day. We were hanging out with my brother, and my brother is like an amazing dad. He's just like awesome. And my oldest daughter was only 8 at the time, and she went up to my brother one day and she was mad at her dad, and she said, Uncle Chris, my dad did this and this and this and this, and he's mean and he's a jerk and blah blah blah. And I remember my brother trying to play devil's advocate, and he was like, well, I'm sure my kids say that about me too. And she looked him dead in the eye and she goes, no, Uncle Chris, you don't understand. My dad is not like other dads. And I was like, oh my gosh, like
Uh-huh.
at 8, she like already had it pretty figured out. But like I said, getting them in therapy is important. And of course, getting kids in with therapists who understand these like personality disorders, and like, because they can be very charming and manipulative, and not all therapists are able to like weed through that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also always get like cautious about like family therapy or therapy with like, that parent and the child and then like a therapist. Because if that therapist is not well versed in these disorders, there can be like more damage done and more like invalidating of the child's experience if they don't really get what's going on,
Yeah, absolutely. What is something that you want listeners who don't necessarily have experience with narcissistic abuse or know anyone who's really dealt with it, what would you want them to know about narcissistic abuse?
That's a great question. I guess I would just want them to even know what it is. Like I said, I didn't know what it was at all. So if you don't even know what this thing is, if then you encounter it, you don't have the tools to kind of cope with it or deal with it. Because,
Right.
narcissism is fairly common. I mean, like, there's ranges of narcissists, of course. Like, not every, like, people can have narcissistic tendencies without being like a full-blown narcissist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's important to just educate yourself on narcissism, because you're going to run across these people, whether it's at work or school or wherever. And so, the more knowledge you have on it, the better you can equip yourself to deal with people like that. Because like I said, you're going to have to, whether it's somewhere in life, you will come across someone with this disorder. And so better you have the skills. And also just for anyone who is having kids or, nieces and nephews or whatever, just to like educate young people, I think is just like the best thing we can do to hopefully, nip this in the bud a little bit. I mean, you're never going to get rid of narcissists, but like to equip people to know the red flags and see these like personalities on display and be able to go, nope, that's not something I'm interested in. I don't want that in my life, so that they don't end up in these, 10 plus year court battles. That maybe could have been avoided if I had that sort of information and knowledge back then,
Right.
I don't know, maybe not, but it sure couldn't have hurt.
Yeah.
So I really think teaching kids about this in school would be the best thing. Like, I know they touch on narcissism in psychology classes and stuff, but to really like hammer in there about healthy relationships, I think would be so beneficial.
Absolutely. So I think too, like with going into school and everything, because, like you're saying, some kids, they don't have that in their home where they have a healthy relationship and get to see
Right.
what that looks like. So having that in school, being like, hey, this is what it looks like. Ideally, we would want all kids to have a great example, but
Of
a lot of times they
course.
don't. So I think
Right.
that would be very, very helpful, especially
Yeah.
because I think a lot of times some of these things start in like high school with
Oh, for
your high
sure.
school boyfriend or high school girlfriend
Yes.
being this way.
Right. Because you don't know anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're either stuck in that, and they end up getting married or whatever, or they're stuck in that for the time, but they go on to still not know what a healthy relationship looks like.
For
And they
sure.
go into another unhealthy relationship. So,
Right.
I think that would be very helpful. I
Yeah, I
love that
mean,
you
if you
point that
think
out.
about it, really, relationships are like the foundation of our lives, right? It's
Yeah.
interesting that, like, in school, we learn about like math and history and all these things. It's like cool, but like most of those things I have not needed in my adult life, where like knowing how to communicate with others and like interpersonal relationships is really the most important tool you can have as an adult, young adult, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it matters so much. And for so little focus to be on that, I feel like as teens and like learning is kind of crazy, really, when you think about it. It's like, if you don't have good, healthy relationships in your life, it's going to be a rough life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also, like you were saying, just relationships in general, you can have friends that are that way and friends
Oh,
that
for
are
sure.
controlling. And so
Yes.
even if it's not a literal romantic relationship, but a relationship with a
Yes.
friend, or a parent or whatever, everyone, I mean, like you said, that's how our lives work is with relationships. So,
Yeah, that's a really good point about friends. Because yeah, friendships too. I mean, especially like in high school, you're gonna meet other kids who behave in these ways, and you
mhm,
can be like, oh, well, she's just like that. But no, she might have these,
right.
characteristics that make her that type of person, and you have to decide if that's something you want in your life or not. And you have to be able to have those boundaries for yourself, where like, okay, she's gonna behave like that, but I'm not going to spend time with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the last question I ask everybody is just how can we be praying for you?
Oh gosh. That's also a great question. Really, my biggest prayer always is just for my kids to find some relief from all of this,
Mhm.
and for the court system to really step up. And I think equipping judges and anyone in that arena who makes decisions for children with all the knowledge they could possibly have on kind of being able to figure out. These different personality types. I mean, to me, my situation is glaringly obvious, right? Like easy
Mhm.
for me to say. But I mean, for example, if you go look at like people's, you can look up divorce like dockets online, it's like public information. If you go look these up, like my one girlfriend got divorced years ago and it was super amicable. If you pull theirs up, there's like 3 or 4 lines on it. It just says they filed for divorce. It's final, the end.
Mhm.
And it's not been touched since. Mine, you literally have to scroll for minutes and minutes and minutes. There's
Wow.
so much there. Like to me, that should be automatic red flag. Someone needs to look at this case intensely and go, yeah, there's a lot of conflict here. It's coming from somewhere. We're going to figure out where it is and we're going to stop this,
Right.
but they don't. And so for me, again, I feel like I get carried away. Um, for me, the biggest prayer I could ask for is really like change within the court system
Mhm.
and just for my girls to just get some relief from all of the chaos and just love. And I just want them to be healthy and happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be praying for you, and I know my listeners always do too. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Again, I think this is something that, like you were even saying, needs to be talked about and
Mhm.
taught about. And so, thank you for trusting me to come on my
Oh my gosh,
show
thank you
and
so
share about it.
much for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I
of
always appreciate
course.
a chance to put it out there. So,
Yes. Well, yes, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll text you. This episode probably won't come out till March just because I have a bunch of episodes I've already recorded.
okay. Hmm.
But I'll text you all that information, and then if you just want to send me a couple pictures of yourself that I can use for social media marketing. But
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can do
yeah.
that.
Well, thank you again. I hope you
Thank
have
you.
a great rest of your day. And I don't know if you have your girls today or not, but have
I
fun with
don't.
them. Oh, well, when they come back, I hope you have a great time with them. And
Thank you.
I'll definitely be praying for you and for the court system and your girls and everyone.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it because I definitely did. I love talking to Melissa. She was just so sweet and kind. And if you want to follow her, she does so much cool stuff on her platforms. I'm linking it all in the show notes, so go check it out. Also, the Talk Busy with Lizzy stuff is in the show notes as well. Have a great rest of your week. I'll see you guys for next week's episode, and God bless.